Hello, everybody, and welcome. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 환영합니다. Welcome. This is our program for the Climate Reality Project Bay Area chapter called How Renters Will Change the World. I am your host today, Alma Soongi Beck, Pet Soongi. I am one of the climate justice co-chairs of our chapter. I'm going to kick off today with a land acknowledgement, and then we will get started with our speaker. Indigenous people consist of less than 5% of the world population and yet protect 80% of the global biodiversity, according to National Geographic. In 2021, there was a pamphlet called Indigenous Resistance Against Carbon, which discussed how efforts to protect Indigenous sovereignty and treaty rights have kept billions of tons of carbon in the ground, equivalent to 1/4 the annual emissions of both the US and Canada combined. Clearly, the climate crisis would be much more severe were it not for the efforts of Indigenous peoples. So the question for us today, as with all days as climate activists and as settlers and occupiers and guests on the lands of Native peoples of the San Francisco Bay Area and around the world, what is our role, our place, and our connection to the land that we are on and the original peoples of the land? And from this perspective, I offer this acknowledgement of the land and the original peoples of the lands, the Ohlone bands of Ramaytush, Karkin, Chochenyo, Rumsen, Muwekma, Amamutsen, the Tamiya Nation, Esalen, the Coast Miwok, Bay Miwok, Sierra Miwok, Homo, Patkin, Yokut, Wapo, and many more. We have over 500 Indigenous groups in California alone and over 100 Indigenous languages. And so on that note, I am going to turn this over to our host or our speaker today, Kevin Morrison. And this is our introduction to Kevin. In a country built on dreams of home ownership, today's environmental fight is focused on homeowners who install solar on rooftops, charge EVs at home, and replace gas heaters with heat pumps. That's good stuff. Yay, homeowners. But half the US lives in rental housing. They don't own a roof or a parking space, and they seem to have little control over their own footprints. In fact, they do. So here we welcome Kevin James Morrison, a climate reality leader, longtime activist, co-chair of our events team on how renters will save the world. Kevin.
Thank you, Alma. That was such a lovely introduction. Thank you for hosting me. I'm delighted to say that we have interest from all over the world and, of course, 10 states in the United States. And thank you all for your interest. The title of this talk is How Renters Will Save the World. I decided just today to put that exclamation point in the title. It seemed wrong without it. Although it depends on how much coffee I've had, this presentation will run just over 20 minutes. I'm going to cover a bit of history to set up the story. First, my history, because I want you to know where I'm coming from. I am the son of a working class family. My mom and dad met doing community theater in the 1950s. That's the two of them in the bottom right of the old newspaper photo. My father was a union worker in a print shop, and my mom was the daughter of a small family farmer, hence the picture where she's holding tomatoes. I include the I voted photo of my mom from 2016 when she hoped she was voting for the first woman president. If she were here today, well, we'll get back to that. Back when my hair was brown, I was the first in our family to go to college and the first in my family to have a job which required a suit and tie. I worked for a while in staff positions at retail and financial service firms, then went freelance in 1994. Since 2016, I've worked almost exclusively with nonprofits focused on the environment, civic engagement, the arts, social justice. My job is to pay attention, to know things that will help activists and organizations in those spaces, and to communicate those things so that everyone can help, because everyone can help. Sometimes, especially in these extraordinary times, we forget that. By the way, I've been an owner, a renter, and a property manager, so I've got a certain holistic perspective that I hope will be helpful. It might be helpful because not everyone is comfortable with renting. Slightly more than half the U.S. are not renters. For myself, I'm lucky to have had parents who lived in the first apartment building in my suburban hometown, pictured here. Maybe that's why I'm comfortable with renting and home ownership and everything in between. So thanks, Mom and Dad. But beyond anecdotes and personal history, a 2023 study found that renters feel society views them as second-class citizens. They say there's unfair stigma toward renters renting in America. They say that older generations view renters more negatively than homeowners. Certainly a common perception is that people rent only until they can own. Part of that comes from that powerful allure of the white picket fence. Here I'm going to focus on the U.S. and on California in particular, but the general lessons are broadly applicable to wherever you live. The story of the metaphorical and sometimes real white picket fence is almost universally appealing. The idea that you and your family and your friends want a space of your own seems self-evident to most people, but in fact, single-family home ownership beyond the family farm, while it had a history among very wealthy families everywhere, it didn't become a mainstream thing until the 20th century. In fact, single-family zoning began in California in 1916, in Berkeley, of all places. It was an effort to keep black and brown people out of the white Elmwood district of Berkeley. That effort in Elmwood was so successful that today, the Elmwood district continues to have the highest percentage of white residents of any census tract in Alameda County. In 1926, 10 years after Berkeley invented single-family zoning, the Supreme Court decided that it was a legitimate use of police power for cities to ban apartment buildings. For the majority, Justice George Sutherland referred to an apartment complex as a parasite, quote, constructed in order to take advantage of the open spaces and attractive surroundings. Throughout the 1930s, Sutherland worked with three other like-minded justices. They struck down many of the New Deal's most progressive policies. To get around them, by 1937, President Roosevelt was ready to appoint 6 additional Supreme Court justices, bringing the total number to 15. And I know what you're probably thinking, that's not a bad idea. Speaking of the Supreme Court, just this year, Clarence Thomas signaled that he is ready to tackle rent control. He called it, quote, an important and pressing question. The California Apartment Association, along with other opponents of rent control, are poised to take advantage of his invitation. Now, if the Supreme Court invalidates rent control, that's really just declaring war on renters, which is stupid because renters mostly live in multi-unit housing, and multi-unit housing has a profoundly positive impact on our planet. Multi-unit housing, which I'm going to call multi-unit dwellings because I like the acronym of MUD, it's very earthy. MUDs are planet-friendly, which is why dense cities like Boston and New York City are among the most energy-efficient cities in the world. Suburbs are much less efficient, especially as they take up more of the environment when they grow laterally. MUDs keep population growth within pre-existing boundaries. MUDs are super energy efficient compared to single-family homes, which are open on all sides. MUDs are typically open on one or two. Also, typical homes use about 100 million BTUs each year. An apartment in a complex with 2 to 4 units uses about 60 million. Apartments in a building with 5 or more units use about 40 million BTUs each year. I was an English major, but the math is easy. MUDs typically use 40 to 60% less energy per unit than a single-family home. MUDs make walkable neighborhoods. Some of you who know Beantown will recognize that, I think. With more people closer together, neighborhoods can support more amenities within a very short distance. People can often bike or walk or work close to where they live. And of course, people can accomplish most of their daily errands in the neighborhood. MUDs make public transport workable within suburbs. Single-family housing makes it nearly impossible to have cost-effective transit systems. Quite simply, more people living in a smaller area makes it easier to develop good infrastructure for public transportation. MUDs also reduce water usage and maintenance. Single-family dwellings use fossil fuels to power mowers and snow blowers and leaf blowers. They use water on individual lawns and flower beds and swimming pools, whereas MUDs need less maintenance per unit since green spaces, gardens, walkways, garages, and entries are all communal. So less water, less maintenance, and a big win for the environment. To summarize, MUDs are overall just better for the planet. They reduce urban sprawl, they boost energy efficiency, they create walkable neighborhoods, they make public transit workable, and they reduce water usage. I realize that I'm not being overly fussy, by the way, about saying multi-unit dwelling residents or tenants. I'm just shorthanding all of them under the umbrella term renters. And I realize, too, that many people own their own dwellings in multi-unit complexes. So you condo owners out there, good job. All of you who live in a multi-unit dwelling just have to go to bed and wake up there. Then you are doing more than many, many people in terms of saving the world. Of course, every single one of us can do more. It's our collective future on the line, so we've got to do more. And as Greta says, I believe that one person can make a difference. One person makes a difference when they walk, when they ride a bike, when they take public transit. But because we live in a country where the single-family house and two-car garage is the dream, only about 1 in 12 Americans live in a neighborhood where they can accomplish their errands on foot. Bikes are great, but less than 1% of people commute on bikes, and 2/3 of people don't ride a bike anytime for any reason at all. Public transit is great, but 45% of Americans have zero access to public transportation. Those statistics change when you focus on renters. Renters walk, bike, and take transit more often than other folks. But that doesn't mean that renters can't do more. Let's talk about what individuals can do based on what the top polluting behaviors are for individuals. And this is for everybody, renters, landlords, homeowners, all of us. In the top 5, number 5 is fashion. It's responsible for 8 to 10% of global carbon emissions, more than aviation and shipping combined. As you can see from this photo, a lot of clothes end up in landfills. A fast fashion polyester top is made from petroleum. It sheds microfibers, and it may spend decades decomposing in a landfill. And it's not just polyester. The average cotton t-shirt requires about 700 gallons of water to make. In a white paper published just a few months ago, BAAQMD at Stanford Graduate School of Business covered the many pitfalls of fast fashion. Let me quote from her paper. To achieve meaningful results, it is crucial for consumers to take a part in this effort. Try to donate items that are still wearable. Consider buying secondhand clothes. And think of renting items needed for a special occasion. If we embrace the need for change, and if our shopping habits reflect this understanding, then we can help drive change in this industry. All right, number 4, banking. Most banks are financing the climate crisis, providing trillions of dollars to fossil fuel companies. We've known about this for years and years. This is a photo I took in 2020 at a rally organized by Sunrise. Just a few days ago, a new report on big oil and big banking showed how cozy they still are. U.S. banks are the worst. One bank alone, J.P. Morgan Chase, was the biggest financer of fossil fuels on Earth, contributing $40.8 billion in funding to fossil fuel companies in 2023. There are green banks that put $0 into dirty business. One of the best is Beneficial State Bank right here in California, co-founded by Tom Steyer and Kat Taylor. There are others too that you can find online. So put your money in green banks. All right, number 3, food and waste. This is another item we've known about for decades. Meat production causes about 14% of the total of human-based climate change. Greenhouse gases from rotted food accounts for around half of all global food system emissions. We need to eat a mostly plant-based diet with mostly zero food waste. Number 2, home heating and cooling. I know if you're a renter, the switch to heat pump-based heating and cooling isn't your choice. Getting a heat pump water heater isn't your choice. But here's the thing. You got to know about this stuff. You got to spread the word. There are so many ways to make heating and cooling more efficient. Because heat pumps are so much more efficient and less polluting, there are programs from the federal government to offer rebates to install heat pumps. State, regional, and local incentives are often available and stackable on top of the federal incentives. Despite things like this article in Consumer Reports, lots of people don't know that heat pumps are real and really great. Remember that old room air conditioner? Today, you can take care of both heating and cooling with room heat pumps. They provide heated air during the winter and cooled air during the summer. They're common around the world, and the U.S. is finally catching up. Again, this is where a lack of knowledge is an issue. Heat pump heating and cooling is cheaper to install and run than traditional natural gas heating alongside a dedicated air conditioning system. Builders and developers are just beginning to wake up to this. With new construction, it's a no-brainer. Why put in gas lines? Electricity does it all and does it better. In terms of retrofitting older buildings with local, regional, state, and federal incentives, it can be cheaper to go all electric. And now, number 1, transportation. For almost all of us, it's the single most harmful thing we personally do to the planet. If you don't walk, bike, or take public transit, you probably drive a car. If you drive a gas car, here in California, you can cut your personal carbon footprint in half by driving an EV. Now, let me be clear. If you don't need a new car, don't get a new car. Use your existing car until it's ready to be dismantled and recycled. But if you need a car, make sure it's an EV. Don't believe the just relentless disinformation from big oil. Versus gas cars, EVs win on every metric. The initial purchase price can be the same or lower than comparable gas cars. That article you see on screen is from last week, and I just had to throw it in. EVs are much more affordable over time than gas cars. An EV operates at the equivalent of about $1.50 per gallon. Their safety record is as good or better than any gas car. They're more reliable than any gas car. There are all kinds of EVs available, including passenger sedans, trucks, small city cars, you name it. They accelerate and brake better. In terms of availability, they are widely available from virtually every brand, and for the planet, they are without doubt far superior to any gas vehicle. It's not even close. Now, here, let me recognize that driving a car, any kind of car, plays into the whole mindset of the white picket fence and the two-car garage. Cars enable sprawl. They make the suburbs possible. But they are the devil we know. Cars are here for the foreseeable future, and EVs, despite some legitimate concerns about rare earth metals and mining, are especially pertinent as it relates to our topic, how renters will save the world. EVs are so much better for the environment. We've known this for a long time. Don't take my word for it. The article on the left is from the Union of Concerned Scientists. On the right is an article from Earth Justice. I especially like the cut line on that one. Electric vehicles stack up better than combustion any which way you look at it. Yep. And here's something that big oil doesn't want people to know. Right to charge laws exist so that renters can charge their EVs. Even if a renter does not have a designated parking spot, renters must, by law, have access to shared parking spaces for EV charging stations. Plus, there are solutions like Orange that deliver low-cost charging to MUDs. Yeah, I get to say MUD a few more times. Instead of costing many thousands, these little solutions can bring down the cost to as little as $500 per space, and Orange will pay for the installation of the chargers, especially if a property owner doesn't have the expertise or time or capital to make an EV charging investment. This is fantastic. It's a win-win-win, a win for the installer, a win for the owner, and a win for tenants who now have EV charging in their complex. All right, I realize we've covered a lot of ground, but I hope it makes you feel optimistic. Fashion, banking, eating, we can tackle all those challenges. Heating, cooling, and transportation, those are harder challenges, but they're getting easier all the time. Please talk about these things with your friends and family. Recent research from Yale indicates that people who are exposed to these kinds of conversations are more confident that when working together, we can affect things positively. I love this. Communication and social cues matter, especially among Republicans. Efforts to cultivate more conversations about climate change may have the added benefit of increasing perceived collective political efficacy, which is researcher talk for, hey, we can make a difference. Speaking of politics, vote. Research shows that renters are much less likely to register to vote. So look at this. If you're not registered and or you're not voting, change that behavior. We've got a big election coming up. Get out there and vote. Wherever my mom is, she will smile big when you do. And that is how renters will save the world. Thank you for your time and attention. If you want to reach out to me directly, email me at kevin@abovethebeehive.org. And now let's take some questions.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Are there any questions? Brenna, were there any questions that were chatted to you?
We don't have any questions. Nick mentioned that as a renter, you can also get an induction hob, which I know is something that some renters do. And there are free induction hobs that are available from many places, but also PG&E.
Okay, great. We have at least 2 hands up in the gallery. And Chris, was your hand up or were you just applauding?
I was just applauding.
Okay, thank you for the applause. Chip.
My question is, I wonder if you know anything about, once I finish electrifying my house, what is the cost to having the lateral removed? Is that going to kill me again?
I don't know the answer to that question. I have asked myself that question because in my Novato home, we have taken out all the gas appliances and we are all electric. But Chip, as soon as I find out, you will be the first one I share that with.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chip. Was there another question there, or did we capture it?
That's it. Thank you. Thanks. That's it.
All right, Natalia.
Hi, I'm Natalia. I particularly enjoyed when you were talking about the different, I guess, like rebates that different states offer, like specifically heating pumps. And I know that, and especially in California, there's so many different programs that not enough people take advantage of. A lot of times because they don't know or they're intimidated to go through the process of like filling out all of these forms to qualify or finding out if they qualify can be really a confusing process. So I'm kind of like wondering, like there are these programs that exist, but the next step and almost like the harder one is how do we get these renters to apply for these programs and to follow through?
You know, it's funny you would ask that because Alma is at heart an organizer and is organizing a lot of action and positive movement toward getting people involved, for instance, in voting. I think that the traditional tools of community organizing are perfectly suitable to getting people on track with this initiative. The challenge is making it sound simple, because if you start talking about heat pumps technically or carefully even, or EVs for that matter, it can seem daunting and confusing and complicated, but it's not. Does that answer your question, Natalia?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. By the way, Alma, I saw Buffalo raising her hand earlier, so maybe we'll get to hear her if she
Okay,
is.
so Nick, I see your hand, but Buffalo, did you have a question?
Can I buy one of those heating cooling pumps to put in the window instead of my air conditioner?
Why, yes, you can.
I just live in one little room mostly. The rest of the house I don't use, and I don't want to have to heat and cool the rest of the house. So I can buy one of those and put it in the window and just plug it in?
Correct. And, that is the beauty of a heat pump, especially a smaller unit. I have heat pumps here that are only room by room. There are people who have the full heat pump system, like an air conditioning or central heating system that heats the air and moves it around. We just have, like, we're in this room, we turn it on. We're in the bedroom, we turn that on. And you are perfectly suited to get one of those.
Oh, so how much do they cost? What's the cost on those things?
Let's make sure we talk about that after the show, because I know there are good answers to that. And partly the good answers depend on getting incentives and rebates attached to the product that you get. And they can, I myself, when I updated my heat pump water heater, got a $9,000 water heater, $9,000 in goods and services for $450 out of pocket. So that was because of incentives from regional agencies like BAAQMD, and I thinks I'm giving myself a thumbs up. Regional, and the government, of course, federal and state, and then other like PG&E gave me a rebate. So we'll figure that out.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Nick, I will get to your. I just want to see below also that if you check out the chat, several people made suggestions for single room heat pump options, and someone said take a look at radiantcomfort.com, and there's actually a link in there. Okay, Nick, your question.
Yeah, I didn't really have you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't really have a question, but I was going to comment on people are saying, how much do I have to pay to get my gas service removed? Everyone I've known that has done this, I've known a few, basically you call up PG&E and say, hey, I don't want your gas anymore. Get your crap off my property. And they have to come out and remove it, and you stop paying. So
awesome.
It's not, yeah, I mean, that's what people have told me. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you're sort of perplexed about, how to go about electrification, and this is maybe more for homeowners than renters, there are services like Quit Carbon that will come out and for no cost, advise, put together a whole plan for how you can go through this, because I've been working on this for over 20 years, which has included solar too. And it's not something you're just going to do overnight.
Yeah.
But there are services that will help you out, and they keep up to date. The rebates and tax incentives and everything change and are super confusing. You can also go to the Switches On. I think it's switcheson.org, and they have very good tools for advising on how to get the best out of the rebates and everything.
Absolutely. I used Quit Carbon myself, and they were very fastidious about making sure I knew everything that I needed to know. So thank you, Nick.
Great. Okay, thank you.
I just wrote those resources in the chat, Quit Carbon and the Switches On. Kevin, we have a few questions from the chat. So Chris asked, in what way can renters benefit for heat pump rebates?
So you could, if you were a renter buying a heat pump like Buffalo was talking about getting, that you will literally take with you from location to location, you could benefit from the federal and state tax incentives, as well as from regional organizations like BAAQMD. But it has to be something that you're taking with you from one location to the next. I mean, as I was saying, one of the things that we have to do is we have to educate owners, landlords, developers that it is in their interest to go with the heat pump option because it's cheaper to install and cheaper to run and better for the planet. And often they don't know. They just don't know.
Next question is from Elisa. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. How do we convince our landlords to invest in more energy efficient appliances, not just EVs?
Well, that is a good question. How do you convince people to do things that is in their best interest, but it may have a price tag up front? I don't have any answer beyond the common sense answer, which is that if there are end-of-life appliances in your house, or arguably appliances that could be better for being replaced with a more modern and up-to-date version, the argument is, I'm not going to be here forever. This is going to increase the value of your unit the next time you put it on the market. You should make this change. And by the way, I'll be grateful, and the planet will be grateful. I'm sure there are other good arguments, but a sincere argument will go a long way.
I'd like to add to that if I can. I just put in the chat an article for landlords, letting them know about the BAAQMD rulings, because those are really going to affect property managers, and they need to know, and a lot of them don't. So you can send it to them and let them know that that's right around the corner.
All right, we need to say out loud, Brenna, Bay Area Air Quality Management District, sometimes referred to as BAAQMD, sometimes referred to as the Air District, they've been tinkering in good ways that are a little bit surprising. Brenna, can you say a little bit more about specifically what you are talking about?
Yeah, so there are rules that are going to be affecting, I think it's 9 Bay Area counties, that is going to make it impossible to replace your gas water heater with a gas water heater. That you won't be able to buy gas water heaters anymore. So they will have to be replacing them with heat pumps. And it's the same with HVAC systems. And so part of what the article explains is letting them know about those when that's happening. And also it's the incentives that are available now. So the reason why they want to know about it and get on it right away.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do one more question from the chat, and then we'll go to QDX, who has a hand up. Chris has a follow-up question. If a rental only has sliding windows, are there heat pumps that work with sliding windows?
I have not seen any myself. They may exist. And it is one of those things where, you know, there are no good answers for everything in this life. Good luck. Let me know if you find anything. I mean, that is something that we need to have in our back pocket for sure.
This one is from Ron Damiet Wilson. Can landlords receive rebates if they install heat pumps or mini splits in tenants' apartments? I was told this was not possible.
Well, whoever told you that was misinformed. They might have come to Casablanca for the waters. In fact, heat pump rebates are available to the owner of the property if someone is owning a property, installing in their property. They are entitled to all of the things, all of the rebates, all of the incentives that anyone would be entitled to if they were also living there. So good question, but yeah, Casablanca, it's in the middle of a desert.
Oh, there. Yeah, I was told that landlords, I am a landlord, and I just installed it. Well, I installed the heat pump. And it is an enormous amount of money because when you have an old house, the panels need to be redone and there needs to be inspections. And so the heat pump for the tenant's apartment, because I do believe in what you're talking about, costs $10,000. I also installed a heat pump dryer, which again, I had to get a 220, because I had a gas. So my point is that I was told, and I'm not in the desert, that landlords with units do not get rebates.
So I am not a lawyer, but I'm very confident about this. And I will follow up too as well when we send out our link to the recording and our follow-up from this meeting. I will make sure we follow up about that for you in particular.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And like I said, I believe in everything you're saying. And I keep the rents low, but this is really a big challenge.
It totally is. And I appreciate the fact that you're here and trying to do all the good things. Speaking of doing all the good things, before we get to street name QDX, Alma, did you notice Wei-Tai came into the room?
I had not noticed. Welcome, Wei-Tai.
We talked earlier about how voting is so important, and especially when you've got leaders, and even though Wei-Tai, we know you're retiring, leaders who are leading with an environmental mindset are so important. And Wei-Tai is also the co-founder of Climate Reality Bay Area. So Wei-Tai, can you wave? Are you there?
Yeah. Hey, guys. Hello, everybody. I apologize for jumping in late here, but good to see so many familiar faces, and I love what this topic is. Couldn't miss it.
Good. It's so good to have you. Thank you for being here. So street name QDX, what up?
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for taking my call. And mostly, I'm glad my phone decided to start working. It just was frozen and it wouldn't allow me to unmute. You raised a question. I'm a recent vegetarian converted person. And I have to say, I don't miss it. I didn't miss it. And I don't feel hungry and all these crazy things that I was told would plague me. And quite the opposite is true. But you made a statement that was really a bit upsetting, and that's the rotting food issue. So as a person that is eating plant-based, how else do I help address this problem?
Well, first of all, Tim, now that you're full screen, welcome to this world of vegetarianism. It's awesome. Part of it is having compost available. So lots of municipalities are offering composting as part of their yard waste pickup, or you can put your compostable material into your yard waste bin, or you can compost yourself. That's the way to take care of your own vegetables or foods of any kind that you're not eating. It's the best way I know to do your own small part. And then I love the fact that you may yet be ready to become an activist in this. We will talk about that.
Great. Excellent. Awesome. Well, thank you. It was a shocking fact that I certainly had never heard, and certainly will be sharing with lots of people. Yeah. So I'll work that into my conversations. So, yeah. To
be fair, it's mostly restaurants and grocery stores that contribute the most in the developed world. There's a whole nother conversation about the less developed world, and we'll have that conversation another time.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, there's some more questions in the chat, Kevin. The next one is regarding banking. How about credit unions? And notably, before you answer, we have an answer in the chat from Siri about her experience looking into credit unions. And her answer is credit unions were indeed the solution, and that she has a link. But I was, curious any thoughts you have as well.
Thank you, she who will not be named, for chiming right in there. Yes, credit unions by and large are much better than any of the big banks in terms of their green and sustainable policies. If you actually just search for sustainable bank or green bank, you'll find a whole bunch of information readily there. I did that for this presentation, and then I just put in the info about Beneficial State Bank because they do a lot of sort of social justice and food justice, as well as not being a dirty bank in any way. So I thought that was a good example.
All right, I am looking for any other questions. There's a bunch of really good, useful comments in the chat. Any more questions? Oh, Nick's got another one. Nick.
Yeah, along the banking lines, I mean, we all have our bank accounts, but we also have our investments and our IRAs and our 403Bs and 401Ks. And you'd be surprised, when you look at, you'd say, oh, this is a good fund, but buried in there, there'll be, 4 or 5% of fossil fuel investments. So I wish I could remember it, but there's a good website you can go to, and maybe someone else here knows it, where you can check. You look at what your, because usually when you invest, you don't invest in one single company. You buy mutual funds and whatever, and they have a multiple amount of different accounts, and you can look each one up by its ticker name and find out just how divested from fossil fuels it is.
Yeah.
Gosh, I wish I could remember that.
So, Nick, you've asked a good question and answered it yourself, which is, do your research, look it up, recognize that lots of banks and financial institutions, investment firms are not necessarily in a habit of putting front and center something that is controversial or may hurt their business. So you got to do the research.
All right, there's another hand from Kristen. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, I'll turn my video on as well. So this all got me thinking about my mom. So my mom is 83 and she's retired and on a fixed income, like Social Security. So she's lower income. And I bought her an electric vehicle, a used electric vehicle. So just to kind of get around Marin County. And the problem is she lives in a multifamily property in Mill Valley, a below market rate housing in Mill Valley that's owned by, this is kind of like a long question, but like I'll get to my question. It's owned by Bridge Housing, which is a huge kind of, below market rate housing and low income housing kind of corporation. And so it took a lot of convincing for me to convince my mom to, when she was getting a new car, to get an EV, because I was like, it's going to save you so much money, and also you're saving the planet. Right. So, she finally agreed to, but then she was just like, I don't want to be driving all over Marin trying to find a place to charge my car. And I was like, you're not going to have to do that. You can totally like plug in and charge at home. But that's impossible where she lives. And so I actually go to her house to charge her car for her, because she can't charge her car by herself. So, but we work it out, and it works out. But the problem is that what I really want to happen is for her landlord, or the property manager or Bridge Housing, to actually install a charging station for all of the renters, in her building. And of course, I don't live there, so I can't really do it for her. I guess I could write it and she could sign it. So there's a program through MCE, which I think is Marin Clean Energy or something.
Yeah.
Where they'll actually install a charger at multifamily, properties and maintain it for free, But the problem that I'm having is that every time my mom, who's 83, like I said, tries to get on the phone and like call MCE and then call Bridge Housing, it just goes nowhere because it's just a too complicated process for her. So I'm looking to try to find a way, like, well, how do we make this easy? Because it's like sort of a left hand and right hand not talking to each other. So MCE drops the ball because it's like they're not going to like try to save my mom, and my mom like can't figure out how to put all of the pieces of the puzzle together. It's just low priority for her. She'd much rather have me come over and charge her car for her, and then she can go about her week. So I'm just wondering if, like, with your experience, like, do you have any advice or, ways to help somebody like my mom who can't, figure this out herself?
Oh, yeah. It's a great question. It is my sweet spot since I do a lot of consulting in the EV space, especially here in Marin. Two things. One, about MCE. They are trying to do the right thing in many ways. They're not necessarily as fully equipped and efficient as they might be, or we would hope they would be today, but it's in their best interest to sell more electricity to people who are fueling their cars with electricity, so they are going to get it right. The other thing to sort of have as a stopgap thing in the back of your mind is we have dozens of EV mentors in Marin County, in Mill Valley, seniors, not so seniors, almost seniors, who can help out someone in this particular instance, your mom. That's a great opportunity to expand the network beyond her daughter, Kristen, to help out. So maybe we can connect afterwards. And before we say goodbye, Kristen, and by the way, did that answer your question?
Well, I'm going to hit you up and
Yes.
maybe you can help mentor, me and my mom. And
or find a community to do that, because that's the only way to do it. It's like, if we can't get water out of the well, somebody's got to help us get water out of the well.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm going to say before I forget is Kristen has an amazing film that is fundraising called The Invisible Mammal. And, Kristen, I can't wait for that to have its fundraising opportunity in Marin and another.
Well, I'll talk to you about that too.
Okay, good. Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, Alma, I hijacked all that.
No, that was perfect. There is a response to Kristen by Wei-Tai Kwok in the chat. One approach for multifamily senior housing, instead of pushing for a 240 volt level 2 solution, try for a 120 volt regular plug, which is usually good enough for seniors. 10 hours of level 1 equals 40 miles of range.
Nice. That is true. Thank you, Wei-Tai.
There was another lovely plug in here. We're in the last 7 minutes of our time together. Elisa mentioned that our CRBA podcast, Everyday Climate Champions, recently had an episode that she hosted on plant-based diets and climate change. So check that out. I think you can find it through our CRBA website.
Yes, and I'm going to just chime in here. My name's Alyssa, and yes, it's the Everyday Climate Champions, which was something initiative out of this group, and you can find it on the site as well in Spotify and Apple Play and all your other favorite music.
And there is the link in the chat too for the one on one. But you can find it in where you can find podcasts.
Thank you, Alyssa. Yay.
Kevin, I actually have a question for you on this topic, if I may. It's related to Kristen's last question, but it's kind of a general question around I would love to get this information out to kind of my networks of people. We are very connected with lots of people who are renters in all different counties in the Bay Area. And I know that this recording is going to become available, just like all of our recordings for all of our events. But really the question is for people who are trying to figure out how to advocate for the right infrastructure, for the one thing I heard from you, for instance, was for EVs, there's a requirement to make access, but a lot of landlords haven't done it. And there's an advocacy piece. So I was curious, do you know groups, and is it county by county, that are actually doing this advocacy? And maybe we could post that when we post our recording for the event.
Yes, and yes. Are you creating work for me, Alma? Because it seems to me like you might be. What you're suggesting is great, because yes, there are groups out there that counter the weight of the California Apartment Association. There are renters groups that advocate for all kinds of things related to the environment. And the right to charge, California is one of 7 states which has a right to charge statute on the books. And it's complicated in the way that, legislation and law talking can sometimes get complicated. But with the right to charge and the fact that there are so many people interested in making money from selling electricity, there are all kinds of new ways that are coming into our consciousness, even as advocates trying to stay on the forefront, that, I'll put something together for you.
Okay, we're running close to the end. Chris, I'm hoping your question is short. Go for
it. Okay. Actually, I was just going to toss in some resources, because there is this phenomena of energy supplied. That's not the term, but appliances that have a battery in them. And I just put in, there's a waiting list for the Channing copper induction oven and range, which has a battery in it. When the power goes out, you plug your refrigerator in and you make dinner for your neighbors. This one is just the range top, not the oven, but it would help postpone the uplift. I'm really lucky. My landlord actually supports what's going on, but he can't he can't upgrade the building. He has done things to help support me, but one of the suggestions, he paid for an electrician to come in and evaluate my garage to see if we could do this. It would require an upgrade of the building, at least at that time, but he did suggest the possibility of installing a battery in my garage that I would fill on a trickle and then charge my car from the battery.
Wow, your landlord sounds super helpful, and that's great. You are right. This is a proposition that has lots of labyrinthine parts to it, and the best you can do is just do one step at a time. So I'll look at what you've put in the chat, and hopefully we'll have a further conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you, Alma.
We are in the last 2 minutes of our time together. I'm going to use this time before we close to pitch other upcoming events of our chapter. I'm hosting a monthly listening circle on voter engagement. We meet the second Thursday of the month. We just met last week, I think, on Thursday, and we're going to be meeting again in August, September, and October. It is an open group. You are welcome to come. You're welcome to bring people. We just share what we're trying and thinking, our hopes and our discouragements, our successes and our frustrations. So if you're looking for a community of people to check in with about the stuff that we're trying around voting and voter engagement, please come. We'll be meeting again in August. This program is going to be available in recording form on our YouTube channel, and you can also get to it through the tab on our events at the top, where you can pull down and go to past events and see this event. And we will also, Kevin, right, let you know if you sign up for this when that recording is available. Does that sound right?
That's right.
Any final words from you, Kevin, before we wrap?
Just remember, voting is super important and talking is super important. We got to talk about all this stuff and make sure people know that this isn't just a bunch of lunatics. Well, in my case, it might be true. It's the right thing to do. Cheaper, better, faster. We got to talk about that more.
On that note, thank you for coming. 감사합니다. Please sign up and become a member if you haven't to get notices of future events. We're very, very glad you came. Keep talking. Go out there and vote. Take care.